The first time I walked into that cafe, I was just looking for caffeine, not salvation. Yet somehow, he handed me both in the same ceramic cup. It's almost ridiculous how a man can ruin your sleep for weeks with nothing more than a quiet smile and a simple "your order's ready." I told myself it was nothing, just a barista with kind eyes. The type of man you thank politely before heading out into the noisy streets of Boston. But the truth was, I came back the next day, and the day after that. Before long, the cafe had replaced my apartment as the place I spent most of my mornings. His name was Ethan. The name suited him uncomplicated, grounded, like the sturdy oak tables he wiped down every night after closing. He wasn't flashy like the men I was used to meeting at networking events or book launches. He didn't care for small talk or false charm. Ethan had this quiet presence, like he belonged entirely to that little cafe. And anyone who sat in his space was invited into his calm orbit. I should have seen it coming, the way my heart bent toward him like a compass needle snapping to north. But denial is a funny thing. It lets you drink the coffee, listen to his low laugh, watch the lines at the corner of his eyes deepen when he smiled while pretending none of it meant anything. One evening, after an endless workday that left me frayed and half-broken, I lingered longer than usual. The cafe had emptied. The chairs were flipped, and Ethan was sweeping quietly, his movements steady and almost meditative. "You don't have to leave just yet," he said, without looking up. His voice was calm, almost too casual, but it held something that made my chest tighten. So I stayed. I stayed while he finished closing. I stayed while he made me one last cup of coffee on the house. And I stayed until the silence between us grew so heavy that I had to break it. "You ever feel like you're running away from yourself?" I asked. It wasn't planned. It just slipped out, like confession always does when you least expect it. Ethan leaned against the counter, mug in his hands, eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my throat dry. "Every damn day," he whispered. Something shifted in that moment. It was subtle, like a door cracked open in a dark room. But it was enough. I started noticing things: how he hesitated whenever customers mentioned books, how his gaze flickered when a newspaper was left behind on a table, how his shoulders tensed if anyone pulled out a camera. I brushed it off as quirks. Everyone has their shadows. But his shadows felt deeper, heavier, like he carried stories inside him that he'd rather bury than tell. Weeks passed, and the pull between us became impossible to ignore. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. Sometimes our hands would brush when I paid, and neither of us moved away fast enough. It wasn't until one rainy afternoon that the truth started bleeding through. I was sitting at my usual corner table, tapping away on my laptop, when I noticed Ethan scribbling something in a worn leather notebook behind the counter. His brow was furrowed, lips moving silently as if he were tasting each word. I knew that look. Writers knew that look. "You write?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He froze, just for a second. But enough. His hand snapped the notebook shut, and that guarded smile returned. "Nah, just notes. Inventory stuff." But I wasn't stupid. I'd been in publishing long enough to recognize someone chasing a sentence like it might save their life. Later that night, unable to shake the image of him hunched over that notebook, I pulled one of the dusty novels from my shelf. A book I hadn't touched in years, written by an author who had disappeared at the height of his fame. Daniel Cross. His words had once shaped me, burned me, taught me how brutal and beautiful love could be. And as I flipped through those pages, I felt my chest constrict, because the rhythm of the sentences, the aching tenderness buried beneath each phrase, was the same rhythm I had just seen in Ethan's eyes when he stared at that notebook. Couldn't be. Could it? The next morning, when I walked into the cafe, Ethan looked at me differently, like he already knew what I had discovered. Like he was daring me to say it out loud. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I ordered my coffee, sat at my table, watched him move behind the counter, shoulders tense, jaw set. I wondered how long he'd been hiding, how long he'd been living this quiet life, running from a world that once adored him. And more than that, I wondered why. But what scared me most wasn't his secret. It was the fact that I already loved him before I even knew his real name. Ethan's secret sat between us like a loaded gun. Silent but undeniable. Every time he caught me looking, he seemed to brace himself, as though I might pull the trigger and say his real name out loud. But I didn't. Couldn't. Love, I realized, is not about dragging someone into the light, it's about waiting until they're ready to step there themselves. Still, the weight of it pressed on me. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake in my apartment. Daniel Cross's novels sprawled across my bed, hearing Ethan's voice echoing between the lines. I recognized him in every character who longed too much, in every confession whispered under breath. The world thought Daniel Cross had disappeared into some tragic abyss. But here he was, pouring me coffee every morning like he wasn't the man who once broke readers open with nothing but ink and paper. One night, I found him sitting alone at the cafe after closing. Rain hammered against the windows, the kind of storm that made the whole city seem to shiver. He didn't notice me at first. His head was bowed over the notebook again, his hand moving with frantic urgency. "Ethan," I said softly. He jumped, slamming the notebook shut like a guilty child. His eyes darted to mine. "Why, vulnerable. You don't have to hide it from me," I whispered. He said nothing for a long moment. Then, finally, he leaned back, exhaling hard. "You figured it out." It wasn't a question. I nodded. Silence hung heavy. He rubbed his face with both hands, shoulders sagging. "I didn't want you to know. Not because I don't trust you, but because once people know, they stop seeing me. They only see him. The writer. The name. The ghost." His voice cracked. "And I'm so damn tired of being a ghost." My chest tightened. I crossed the room, sat opposite him, close enough to hear the tremor in his breath. "I don't care about Daniel Cross. I care about Ethan. The man who makes my coffee too strong when he knows I've had a rough night. The man who listens when I can't keep my own thoughts straight. That's the man My voice faltered, but I didn't back down. That's the man I'm falling for." His eyes met mine, startled, like he hadn't dared to imagine anyone could want the pieces of him left behind after fame had chewed him up. "You don't mean that," he whispered. "I do." The storm outside roared, as though the world wanted to drown us out. But inside, there was only the quiet thrum of two hearts finally speaking the same language. He reached across the table, his hand brushing mine. It was the gentlest touch, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unsentences. "If you stay," he murmured, "you'll have to love a man who sometimes disappears into his head, who runs when things get too loud, who's still trying to forgive himself for everything he lost." I squeezed his hand. "Then I'll stay." For the first time since I'd met him, Ethan's walls cracked, and I saw the raw, aching man behind them. His eyes glistened. His mouth trembled into the faintest of smiles. And I knew this was a moment I'd carry for the rest of my life. Loving Ethan wasn't easy. There were days when he vanished into silence. days when his fear of the past threatened to pull him back under. But there were also mornings when he kissed me behind the counter before unlocking the door, and nights when he read me passages from his notebook, his voice low and trembling, as if he were handing me pieces of his soul. The world still thought Daniel Cross was gone. Maybe that was for the best. Let them miss him. Let them wonder. Because here, in this small cafe tucked between brick buildings and restless streets, he was alive, messy, imperfect, human, and he was mine. Months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Ethan handed me a fresh cup of coffee, his hand lingering in mine longer than usual. "What's this?" I asked, noticing the folded paper tucked beneath the mug. "Something I've been working on," he said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. His ears flushed pink. I unfolded the paper. It was a dedication page. At the top, in his unmistakable handwriting, it read, "For the one who found me when I thought I was lost. For the one who loved Ethan, not Daniel." My throat tightened. I looked up at him, and he gave me a smile so soft, so utterly unguarded, that I felt the world tilt. "You're writing again," I whispered. He nodded. "Because of you." I set the paper down, pulled him into my arms right there behind the counter, and kissed him like it was the only truth that had ever mattered. And maybe it was. Because in the end, love is not about the names we hide behind or the legacies we leave. It's about the quiet mornings, the gentle touches, the storms we weather together. I didn't fall in love with Daniel Cross, the world's lost writer. I fell in love with Ethan, the man who handed me salvation in a cup of coffee. And for the first time in his life, he let himself believe he deserved it. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.